Also YouTube, Dale, Sean and Donald here from Zephyr Wargames, and we are bringing you spell speeds. So one of the most complicated areas of Yugioh, and hopefully we'll do our very, very best to explain that in an understandable way. So Donald is going to take us through this one today.
So, spell speeds. This is what determines whether cards can be activated in response to and such. So, without further ado, there are 3 spell speeds. You've got spell speed 1, spell speeds 2, and spell speeds 3. So, spell speeds 1 are card effects when they are activated during your turn. So, most commonly, spells, except quick play spells, are spell speeds 1. Monster effects, in which say once per turn or during your turn, are also treated as spell speeds 1.
What determines that they're spell speed 1?
Those are the card effects that would start a chain. They don't They don't continue a chain. They start the chain. They are the beginning of the chain.
So activating effects starts a chain. So activating spells starts a chain. Activating a monster effect that says once per turn during your turn, start a chain. So cards like these are spell speeds 1. Spell speeds 2 are generally your quick play spells, your traps, or monster effects in which happen in either player's turn. So all traps are spell speeds 2, except for counter traps, which we'll get on to later.
Okay, so just so you can, I think the easiest way to keep a track of what's going on is you need to think of them how they start a chain. Donald will do an example chain at the end of this, but spell speed 1s start a chain. Spell speed 2s react to that chain, so they're the second in the chain.
You can, however, start a chain with a card that is spell speed 2, depending on the situations, obviously.
Yep. And finally, we have spell speed 3, which are always counter traps. Always counter traps.
So as we said in our trap video, counter traps are the ones with the little circle and an arrow in the top right hand corner next to trap card.
Okay. So, without further ado, I'll explain some chain links, in a sense.
Okay, just quickly, on the spell speed 3s, only other spell speed 3s can react to spell speed 3s.
Yeah. So
you can't, sorry Donald.
That's alright.
So you can't activate, for example, a spell speed 2 or a spell speed 1 in reaction to a spell speed 3.
Just to summarise, you can only activate a spell speed card that is either the same number or a higher number. So, as Dale was trying to say, you have a spell speed 1. Let's say you activate Swords of Revealing Light. The general policy is that starts a chain. So your opponent or yourself, so your opponent generally would respond with a spell speed 2 or spell speed 3. So in this case, I'll activate a spell speed 2, Mystical Space Typhoon, to chain to spell speed 1. I then have the option to activate a spell speed 2 again, or activate a spell speed 3.
Well, your opponent would be activating the spell speed 3. Mostly, wouldn't they?
Well, you could activate spell speed 3, but you'd only be negating your own stuff, so ideally you wouldn't want to be doing that. Your opponent, like Sean said, your opponent would be activating spell speed 3.
So, you activate spell speed 1, your opponent has spell speed 2, and then you very well could activate spell speed 3. Now in chain links, the card that is activated last is resolved first.
Chains resolve backwards.
So imagine it like you're stacking the cards on top of one another and then applying the effects from top to bottom. So, in this case, I activate Swords of Living Light, my opponent activates Mystical Space Typhoon, targets Swords of Living Light to destroy it, and then I activate Magic Jammer. So you then apply Magic Jammer first, you discard one card from your hand to the graveyard, then negate the spell activation of the spell and destroy it. So by negating the activation, you essentially negate the effect. Destroying, such as Mystical Space Typhoon, does not negate. So please read cards carefully so you can distinguish whether they negate or destroy. In all sense, all counter traps generally have the word negate, and quick play spells don't, or traps, normal traps. So you negate Mystical Space Typhoon, and Swords of Living Light is left on the field. My opponent in this chain could very well, since Spell Speed 3 has been activated, your opponent could very well activate another Spell Speed 3. So in this case, 7 Tools of the Bandit, which their opponent will, the player will pay 1,000 life points to negate the activation of a trap and destroy it.
It's pretty similar. We don't want to. Obviously, this could go on near enough endlessly.
Yeah.
But just remember that only a Spell Speed 3 can react to a Spell Speed 3. Now, just quickly walk through. For example, if you activated Swords of Revealing Light, your opponent activated Magic Jammer,
Yeah.
and then you activated MST.
So, as I mentioned before, this is Spell Speed 1, this is Spell Speed 3. This is a Spell Speed 2. Because a Spell Speed 2 is lower than a Spell Speed 3, you can't activate a Spell Speed 2 to a Spell Speed 3. So, in this sense, you play a Spell Speed 1, your opponent activates the Spell Speed 3, you cannot activate a Spell Speed 2
Or lower.
In response.
When you normal summon monsters or tribute summon monsters, this does not start a chain. So let's say you summon a monster, your opponent cannot activate quick play spells or traps in response to the summon, unless after the summon has been successfully done. So let's say I summon, you cannot activate in response to the summon. After the summon is successful, then you can activate quick play, Spell Speed 2 type cards in response.
So Spell Speed 2 or lower, but you can activate Spell Speed 3 cards. However, the only one that really affects this kind of scenario as a normal summon is Solemn Warning.
So, in this case, when I summon, before the summon is successful, your opponent can very well activate a counter trap, which says in its text, it negates the summon. So what in this case, it's treated as though the monster, before the monster hits the field, you negate the summon and it's generally sent to the graveyard. So, this is where it can get a bit confusing as well. You have attempted to normal summon. Your opponent has negated that summon with Solemn Warning. Because you have attempted to summon, you don't get to normal summon again that turn. It is basically like an unsuccessful summon. Another thing that Solemn Warning does that kind of confuses some people is, for example, when you pendulum summon, you're pendulum summoning 5 monsters from your extra deck. Solemn Warning would send all 5 of those monsters to the graveyard. Because, number one, they've not been successfully summoned, so they can't go to the extra deck, like a normal pendulum monster would. And secondly, pendulum summoning, even you can summon 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 monsters, it still counts as one summon. One special summon in total. So if a card specifically says special summon multiple numbers of monsters, it still counts as a one scenario of a special summon.
So when a card, for example, Max C says draw a card for every special summon, if your opponent pendulum summons 5 monsters, you only get to draw 1 card because it's still considered as a 1 scenario special summon.
Okay, so in your defense, the only way to counteract, as I said before, this counter trap, you activate another counter trap to negate the counter trap. Now, here's some issues in which can be considered confusing.
You can play quick play monster effects, can't you?
So let's say I activate, your opponent activates a spell speed 2, and your opponent, you then activate a spell speed 3. This comes within as probably more of game mechanics, is that some cards require a cost. So for the counter traps, the cost for activating Magic Jammer is you need to discard 1, and for 7 Tools of Bandit you need to pay 1,000 life points. So let's say this was the chain. You activate spell speed 2, your opponent activates spell speed 3, and then you activate a spell speed 3 in response. So cost is generally part in order to activate them. So in this case, you pay 1,000 life points. Well, actually, your opponent activates Magic Jammer, so they then have to discard
Before anything else is activated.
So that is treated as a cost. You then respond with your 7 Tools of Bandit, paying 1,000 life points. Because you negated the effect, it's still considered that the cost for it is not negated. Because the cost is required for it to be activated in order to play the card.
Just as a note, costs are mandatory; they're not optional. You have to do it.
So, for example, if your opponent was too quick on the game and activated MST, you activated Magic Jammer before discarding. Your opponent activates 7 Tools Bandit. You still have to discard. You have activated this card. You still have to do it. There is no ways around it. So technically, you should be playing it out slowly. It should be activate Magic Jammer, send my card to the graveyard, then my opponent activates 7 Tools of Bandit. That's how you should correctly play it, so that there is no confusion and there's none of this, your opponent going, oh, but you've negated it, I don't need to send to the graveyard. Yes, you do. It's cost, it's mandatory. You have technically activated that card. So just quickly on monster effects as well. So for example, Psy-frames, which get quite complicated, they're, again, because like Donald said, they're during either player's turn, they're considered as spell speed 3, is that correct? 2. Unless specifically states. So for example, there is a Psy-frame card that negates trap effects. So, when you activate Solemn Warning, even though it's a spell speed 3, because Psy-frame specifically states it negates a trap effect, it can outdo Solemn Warning. But that's for a more specific deck that we don't really need to touch too much on.
Okay. Residing with monster effects, I believe I haven't covered this yet. Continuous effects, such as monsters and continuous spells and traps,
which we showed with the unlimited sign on our previous videos in spells and traps in the top right hand corner.
They are treated as spell speeds 1, but once they are on the field, they do not start chains. So just like your normal summon, they do really, in reality, they don't start chains at all. So it's not spell speed 1, they just don't start chains. So basically, once they hit the field, you apply the effect immediately without starting a chain. So just go over trigger effects. So once per turn are spell speed 1, and in either player's turn are spell speed 2. So that pretty much covers it, as there's only spell speed 1, spell speed 2, and spell speed 3. More to know that spell speed 3s are only for counter traps, spell speed 2s are for traps, all traps except counters, and quick play spells, and monster effects, which are in either player's turn. And spell speed ones are during your turn or spell cards. And that is it.
So where would Fiendish Chain and Breakthrough Skill happen with Lord of D?
So, cards.
That would be in response to the successful summon.
That would be in response to a successful summon.
That's fine.
So let's say your opponent summons a monster, and you were intending to activate an effect that would negate its effect, such as
Breakthrough, Fiendish Chain, stuff like that.
And they happen after the monster has been successfully summoned.
Yes.
And that is it, yeah, as I mentioned before.
So, after the successful summon, so as Donald was saying, the monsters themselves don't start a chain. Their effects don't start a chain. So you react to the summon, whereas, for example, your Breakthrough or your Fiendish Chain would start the chain. So
okay.
I think that's covered everything on the basics on that one.
If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below.
Yep.
As we'll happily respond to them and provide you our help.
Yeah, we can make more videos if there's something that you want to see in action, or a specific deck you want to see in action, or questions you have that you want to see live. By all means, let us know and we'll definitely do that for you. Check out our other videos if you have any other questions that may have been answered in those. And as usual, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share the page for us. Without further ado,
and happy doling!